Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, we have over 24 podcasts of senior and caregiver resource podcasts that can be listened to and followed anywhere you enjoy music or podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even Alexa, and more. And I am your host, Darlene Mahoney with SeniorLivingGuide.com. And I am excited to share the news that on our national website, SeniorLivingGuide.com, we provide you with a one-stop website to find senior retirement communities, assisted living, memory care, or even home health and caregiving services in all easy to navigate website. I would also like to thank our podcast sponsors, Parish Healthcare. And today I am really super excited to introduce you to our guest. He is the founder and CEO of Tuscan Gardens, Dr. Larry Pino. Larry is an entrepreneur and practicing attorney. He also hosts his own podcast, Tuscan Talks Senior Living Today. So definitely check that out. He opened his first community at Tuscan Gardens, Venetia Bay in 2016, and has two additional communities, Tuscan Gardens of Palm Coast and Tuscan Gardens of Delray Beach. We welcome Dr. Pino. I am super excited to have you on our podcast today, as your journey to open senior living communities began with looking for your mom.
That's the case. I'm delighted to be here, Darlene. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So many stories start out, as I've talked with people in senior living in general, with a passion that they found that came from a personal story with a family member that they loved and finding a need. How did that kind of start out with you?
Yeah, pretty much the same way. Mom was incredibly social, and mom and dad were fine. They had moved down to the Central Florida area, and they were fine. Mom was out and about for a long time. Dad passed away. And so we moved mom very close to us, about 7 minutes from our house, my direct family. And it was fine. And, over time, she continued to do what she did socially and so forth. And then there came a time in which it wasn't so fine. So we were trying to figure out what to do with her. And I brought in a 24/7 caregiver to live with her, as she was really beginning at that point to become more and more restricted. And that was really very, very strong. Mom was born and raised in Italy and came over as the first Italian war bride. So I brought in an Italian caregiver to take care of her. So they cooked the same food, they ate the same food and so forth. And again, it was fine. It was, generally she was in her own home. We visited her every Saturday and Sunday and so forth. But, there came a time in which, little by little, her visitors continued to either pass away or just couldn't travel any longer. So she was becoming more and more isolated, if you will. So I looked around to try to figure out what I could do about that. And that's what began the journey. So I looked around the Central Florida area because I wanted her obviously close by. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't find anything that made any sense to me. Certainly things have changed in Central Florida, Darlene, since then. But they had certain, shall we call it, aromas attached to them. There wasn't a lot of activity happening and so forth, and I just couldn't do it. I could not move mom into one of those communities. So I kept going back and forth, and I tried again and again. I decided no. And then, somewhere along the line, and this was about 10 years ago, somewhere along the line, I started asking myself, okay, so what would it need to look like if I wanted to put mom in one of these communities, these senior living communities? What would it have to look like? And I started jotting down notes as to what it would have to look like. So, for example, it would have to have high ceilings. It would have to have lots of natural light. It would have to have lots of vegetation. It would have to have natural fragrances. The smell of the smell of Italian sauce in an open kitchen, basil near the front doors, rosemary, herb areas. Not a lot of hallways. I wanted open spaces, wanted lots of socialization, and so forth and so on. So I just kept writing that stuff down. And then I would ask myself, it's like, what am I doing? I don't know. I'm a lawyer. I don't know anything about senior living. I don't know anything about healthcare. What am I doing here? And I debated with myself for about a year and a half. And finally, I just simply said, I really want to do this. I really want to do it. So that began the journey of trying to figure out how to bring Tuscan Gardens as a concept into Tuscan Gardens as a brick and mortar building. And finally, in 2014, we found a property in Venice, Florida, which we created as Tuscan Gardens, as you mentioned, Tuscan Gardens of Benicia Bay. And that turned out to be our first community. It's 136 units of assisted living and memory care. And that began in earnest when we opened it in November of 16. And now we have 3 of those. So those are the cliff notes of it. But most importantly, from my standpoint, not only did I want a wonderful ambient environment, which was really very open and very inviting to seniors, but on top of that, I really wanted programmatically to make sure that they had lots of things to do, areas where they could be intellectually challenged, lots of opportunity for socialization. I certainly didn't want someplace, the way that I referred to it at that time is, I didn't want someplace that would warehouse seniors. I wanted someplace where they were engaged. So that was the genesis of it.
Right. Well, that sounds amazing. So basically, when you were originally searching, which was about 10 years ago, now we all know senior living communities have definitely started listening, especially as we're coming into a different type, you're not the seniors where we thought of senior housing as more facilities, I think, or nursing homes. And now we do kind of refer to them and look at them more as communities. I think that they've started coming a little bit, they're starting to consider some of those things that you just talked about, because of people like you and people that really want to take those considerations in when they're looking for their family members. And then also seniors themselves are making some of those decisions, and they're going, you know what, I want something different for myself. I really want to feel like I'm in a home environment, or I'm in a space that I really love, and it's not a facility, or it's not a nursing home. That wrap that it used to have back in the day, you really want to kind of wipe that clean, and you really want something that's so much more inviting I talked to you a little bit about my dad and that type of thing. It's a hard decision, when you're making these decisions for your family members, or they're helping you make some of these decisions. It is the hardest decision, one of the hardest you will ever make in your life.
Sure.
And it will keep you up at night. It will haunt you. You will think about it in your car. And it's just something that I don't think that you will ever take lightly. So you have to make the right decision. It's not something that can ever be taken lightly. So tell me, what are some of the things that you saw that you knew? I know you went down like a list, but what are some of the things that, like the activities? To me, when you move into a senior living community, especially assisted, clearly the majority, if not all, do not have their cars any longer, which is just a huge thing that a senior has to give up, is their ability of freedom to just get in their car, run to the grocery store, go get a cup of coffee, go meet a friend, do all the things that you had the liberty to just go and do. So you want to be able to provide them with a full day of activity versus just sitting there watching TV, or those types of activity, which actually can bring on depression in a senior. And if there's any cognitive decline, it's gonna catapult that even further.
Sure. So a couple comments then, Darlene. So first of all, I think it's probably important to recognize, because you were talking about that whole transition, which was absolutely a clear transition. So if you're thinking somewhere, that debate that I was referring to before was really between 2010 and 2012. So that's sort of what my baseline was for these communities that were out there. Then, of course, I built on those to ultimately create the charter for what Tuscan Gardens Senior Living was going to be. But if you think about where that was in 2010, most senior and aging facilities, as you call them, really came from the healthcare environment. So you started with skilled nursing, which were nursing homes in the old days, right, in the 1950s and 60s. Assisted living didn't actually start until the late 70s. So the very first one of the assisted living communities that were out there as a concept came in about 1973 to 1977. That's when you started to begin to see those assisted living architectures, if you will. But they were still primarily healthcare centric. So you're dealing with 50 to 60% of the programming was really all about healthcare. And this was a safer environment. In order to put a senior in, they don't really need skilled nursing. We're going to give them a safer environment, but we're still going to be very focused on the healthcare component attached to that. So now fast forward, two things are actually happening. So number one, you're beginning the model. You now have about 20 years, a little bit more than 20 years, maybe even 30 years of experience with assisted living. But also, number two, what you also have is the beginning of that older senior who basically says, I'm not going to go quietly in the night. So I want something a lot more than that. What else you got? And that became an influencer on it. And then I think really the third component is that you began this component that says, all right, senior living does have a healthcare component attached to it. But what it also has is a hospitality component attached to it. And so out of that really long answer to really a short question, out of that emerges this concept of saying, okay, so now let's talk about what is possible. And so when I created the charter, which turned out the reason I created the charter was because the team that I had gotten to develop the first Tuscan Gardens basically said, okay, Larry, what's your vision? What is it you want to have happen here? And so I put it on paper, and I went through all of the component parts, and it eventually ended up as the book that I wrote, which was called Reinventing Senior Living. It's on Amazon now. Reinventing Senior Living, the Art of Living with Purpose, Passion, and Joy. And that really kind of created a synopsis of the concept that I wanted for Tuscan Gardens. What I didn't want, I wanted a vibrant community. I wanted a vibrant community where individuals would not want to come in because they needed it, but because they wanted it. And even to this day, what we talk about is the fact that I'll tell you what, whether you need it or not, you tour with us. Take a tour with us. You're going to want to come in. You're just going to you're going to want to wait, but you're going to want to come in because that's the life. That is the type of life you want. So now take a look at what those things look like. So, it's the old adage, the cliche, bingo. Well, yeah, some people like bingo. So of course we have bingo, but that's like the small portion.
Especially if you win.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a small portion of it. What you also have is you have recitals, you have art lessons, you have music lessons, you have technology lessons. We have, for example, we subscribe to One Day University. And One Day University actually comes into, a little bit challenged by COVID, but putting COVID aside, One Day University gets piped into the media room, into their own suites also, but gets piped into the media room. And we'll do One Day University does hour-long lectures. Some are a little bit longer than that. And so what you do is you do an hour-long lecture. They've got a massive inventory of subjects, and they add to them every day. And after that, you have a discussion on it. Same kind of concept with TED Talks. You have a TED Talk, and then you have the opportunity for a social discussion pertaining to it. You have Sunday tea, where you have that type of opportunity. All kinds of different, canasta, a bridge, chess.
You're talking me into it right now.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
ready.
so if you think about, and if you think about a life of purpose, passion, and joy, so it's not a place where you go to retire. It's a place where you go to really enjoy every single moment. And the way that I discussed it, mom, unfortunately, was not able to hold on long enough for Tuscan Gardens, but Janet, my wife's father and mother, were. And so
I love that. I know I had read that your mom didn't live long enough to see your vision in Tuscan Gardens. And I found that very sad, but I love the fact that your wife's parents were,
yeah,
so they were able to enjoy your vision. Yeah,
and
that's nice.
And the conversation that I had, because my mother-in-law, Janet's mother, the very first thing I'm not going into one of those old folks' homes.
Yeah.
And I would say to her, I'd say, Lou, you don't know what you don't know. You've never seen Tuscan Gardens. You don't know that it has nothing to do with the old folks' home. So when, after a year of finally just suggesting that she really check it out, so she and my father-in-law moved in, and they moved in, and the very first thing we do is we're moving them into her suite and all that sort of thing, and they bring up a lunch for her. And so I say, okay, so Lou, I just want you to understand, this is what it looks like. So what's going to happen is, unlike the way it is at home for you, they actually prepare food. And it's wonderful menu of foods every single day, and it changes all the time. And on top of that, here, when you're in your suite, they're going to come back and get the dishes and bring it down in the dining hall, in the dining room. When you're sitting at the table, you just get to stand up after you've had this wonderful meal. You get to stand up and walk away. You don't have to clean the dishes. And
you signed me up.
Yes. And the only thing you need to do while you're sitting there is you're thinking, after you finish your conversations, gee, I wonder what I'm going to participate in for the rest of the afternoon. That's Tuscan Gardens. That's a day in the life, right? So when we're talking about, just to kind of go back to the question, when you're talking about this, you're talking about, signature dining. You're talking, and by the way, I'm not talking just about Tuscan Gardens, although I am, but I'm talking about what is the template? What should it look like?
Right.
Well, what it should look like is absolute signature dining. It should look like resident engagement. Where you're constantly active. You have 20 different things you can choose from. Question is, which one do you want to do? One of our, in Venetia Bay, for example, one of our community relations directors calls it that, it's the essence of cruising without leaving port. So you have constant entertainment and activities. That's what senior living should look like. And that was the vision.
Yeah. So basically what this boils down to is how we have been, how you and some other communities clearly are reinventing senior living, because there are others that are doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
So it is really something that when you go onto SeniorLivingGuide.com, or when you go to start doing your research for the community, for your loved one, for yourself, what to look for, and really understanding that you're not just looking for the healthcare aspect of your community, and that the other items for the signature dining, for the dining, for the activities, all these things are so super important. And I do think I like the idea that the open spaces. So these are things people need to be looking for when they're looking for a community in assisted living, or even independent living. I know that there's some independent livings that are kind of hybrids. That would be, these are things you should be considering. So I think you need to review all of these different things. You need to build a checklist of what's really important to you. And even the specific classes, you were talking about some different things. I have a client that has woodworking. They have a woodworking shop. Now it's a CCRC.
Right.
So that's one of the things that they have. And I thought that was the coolest thing because I know that my dad loved woodworking. And if, he was here or what have you, he would have thought that was the cat's meow. So looking for different things that are important to you and finding out which communities offer that is a goal.
Yeah, for sure.
When you're doing
Yeah.
your research.
If you're taking a look at it and just in terms of your viewers, sort of the checklist of items they'd want to be looking at. First of all, certainly I'm not tossing the healthcare, but that's almost a given. So it's kind of like if you're going to be going into a senior living community, healthcare is an absolute given. It's not like, guess what? You get proper healthcare. It's kind of like, of course you get proper healthcare. Why in the world would you be doing anything other than that? So yeah, so for typicals, everybody has every state has a regulatory component to it. We have one in Florida, which is called ACA. So of course you check to make sure that from a healthcare standpoint, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not being cited for violations or for deficiencies or anything of that nature. So that's number one. That's a given. You're going to make sure that that's the case. You also want to interview when you're going into the senior living community. You want to interview whoever whether it's a director, an assistant director of healthcare in that community. You want to interview them. You want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what are their protocols, what are their systems, how do they map up to make sure that they're keeping current on their residents' medications, and so forth and so on. So that's a given. The second thing that your viewers should be looking at is they should not be going in a tour and also not asking for certain support materials. So tell you what, let me see a calendar for this month's activities. Let me take a look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. What would I, if it's the prospective resident, or my mother or my father, if it's the adult child, what are they going to be doing every single day? Let me see that calendar.
Yeah.
And then number three, you want to go right back to that dining. Tell you what, I'd like to see the month's menu. What does it look like? How often does it change? What are the options that are going to be available? Is there an all-day menu plus specials for the day? So how is all that done? Is that being done on site, or is that contracted out to a third-party provider? You would want to know that.
Yeah.
Fourth thing you'd want to also check. There is a difference between owner-operated and third-party operated, which I have a couple of chapters in my book on. A third-party operator, very similar to what hotels are like. It's kind of like the owner of that Marriott is the owner of the Marriott. They don't manage the Marriott. The Marriott manages the Marriott, and so forth and so on. In senior living, most of the senior living communities out there are third-party operated or corporate operated. They're not all that many that are owner operated. So from that standpoint, you kind of want to understand it. So how does this get managed? As the executive director who's sitting there in that particular community, do they work for the community, or do they work for a third-party corporation, which is 1,000 miles away? And what are the resources available to that community? And what is their connection to the broader community in which they rest? So that becomes an appropriate conversation that you also want to have. And I'd say probably just number 5, without creating a whole laundry list here. There is no better resource. So for example, in Senior Living Guide and other resources online, there is no better resource than checking testimonials. When you're there, it's kind of like, and I'm sure, Darlene, you're in the same situation. Anytime Jen and I are traveling and we want to find a restaurant, easiest thing to do is just simply go to the rating services and read the testimonials about that particular restaurant. I mean, if it's not rated a 4.4, 4.5, why? I mean, why would we even bother? Because there are others that are. So going to the testimonial providers, going to a Senior Living Guide for their resources, and just simply Googling online and reading the testimonials. How many 5-star Google reviews do they have? And so forth, will give you in the voice of the resident or the voice of the resident's loved ones
Yeah.
will give you a real understanding about that community.
Yeah, I also recommend to everyone, and I've done seminars on this at conferences, the importance of looking at the social media pages of your communities as well, because that's really an authentic look into what happens on a daily basis. At least it should be. I know some communities don't keep a very current or authentic page. It's more stock photos.
Right.
And I encourage communities not to do that. But if you're looking at a community, always visit their social media pages, because you can really see what's going on behind the scenes in a very authentic way. So I think that's important. And if you do have the option or ability, I know with COVID, things are always a little wonky. But if you're inside of a community, speak to a resident and say, how do you like it here? Are you enjoying it? How's the food? You can just speak in a very casual way without, grilling them or asking for a testimonial per se, just to get a little bit of feedback. I think that's super important as well.
Those are two really, really great suggestions, I think. And one of the comments that I would make is scheduling tours at a time in which the residents are down for exactly that reason. So that, if they're down there and they're eating, for example, there's no better opportunity to just simply have a chance to chat, to sit down, even have a cup of coffee, sample the food, and have an opportunity to be able to talk to the residents. And secondly, the second comment that you made is a very important one. So what social media does, and you use the word authentic, what social media does is it provides an authentic window into the community. And if they have a really vibrant social media presence, the reason it's going to be vibrant, you can't create out of nothing.
Right.
The reason it's going to be vibrant is because lots of stuff is happening inside that community.
Lots of good stuff.
Yeah. And you get a window into it. You get to watch and see what's happening at that community. So absolutely, if one of your viewers is really thinking about a particular community, go on their social media and see what it looks like. If it's third-party stuff, if it's
evident.
Exactly. If it's inauthentic photography or platitudes or just cliches, if it's any of that stuff, you're going to know it a mile away. But if it's the real stuff happening, you'll also see that, and you'll get a real understanding of what that culture of that community looks like.
Yeah. And I've told this story before, and I will reshare it. My dad, when I put him in the assisted living, I was very comfortable where he was at. First of all, they had a very robust social media. But I saw my dad every day. I mean, I was so stressed out that he was there. It caused me so much stress and anxiety, because I loved my dad so much. I can't even tell you. And I know most people can appreciate and relate to what I'm talking about, but in my heart, I just don't think anybody can understand. But he has since passed. But when he was in that community, they posted consistently. I liked their page. And because I do a lot on our social media platforms and things like that, I would see him dancing to music during the day. And there was a huge sense of relief that would come over me to see that he's okay. He's having a good day. He's dancing to music. Things are happening. So it was something that just made me feel so much better. And to see that, activities were happening, because he was in cognitive decline. So he was not super social. He was having issues with that. So it would make me feel really good to see that there were things happening when I didn't have to be there. I was okay working. I was okay doing what I needed to do. And I would see him later, but he was okay with me not being right on top of him. So that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
If you choose that community, that you're going to have that peace and comfort as well. Once you move them in, you're going to be able to see them, doing some of those activities on the social side.
And that's absolutely correct. And that's why, for example, I had indicated the testimonials were so important, because what ends up happening, that testimonial that you just made for the community that you selected for your dad is one that you would clearly share. I had enormous anxiety, unbelievable guilt, Am I really going to do this with my parent? And you ultimately have to, because frankly, it's the right decision at a certain point, because they're safer and they're much better off, and they have a fuller life if they can get in that type of social environment, if it's the right environment. And so when you then, as an adult child, see that, guess what? It is the right decision. He's enjoying himself. He has friends. It's kind of like in Janet's father's case, who has subsequently passed away, by the way. But in Janet's father's case, where we would, same exact situation, where we're seeing him where they were pretty much isolated in their home, living in the house and having to take care of themselves, and not having a lot of friends. And then he was a very sociable guy. Social guy. And so we now see him where he has the opportunity to be able to walk around and to engage conversations. He was a chess player, and to play chess and to do those things that he wasn't going to be able to do in the house with just his wife. Yeah. That becomes enormously just, sigh of relief, right? Yeah. And you would no doubt would have had an opportunity to be able to express that to others. So yeah, that's extremely important.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. That's such a great testimony too, that he was able to continue with the chess playing, because that's also great to keep the mind active. And I mean, especially with that particular, you have to be, I would imagine, I haven't played chess, but I think it looks like you've got to be a pretty strategic thinker.
Oh, I'll tell you, but certainly in his case, it was chess, but for so many, and I make this comment all the time, when you're dealing with seniors in a senior living community, it's a treasure trove. It's a treasure trove of history. It's a treasure trove of experience. It's a treasure trove of the skill sets which they have created. I mean, we literally have a pianist in one of our communities who literally will just go down. We have a grand piano in the front area, and she has a grand piano in her suite also, and who will just literally just go like this and just play this unbelievable, she gathers a crowd every time she plays. We have an opera singer in one of our other communities, and we have so many people who we have 3 doctors. In one was a naval surgeon, another one, specialized in aging, and they give lectures, to the others inside the community. It's a treasure trove of all of these individuals with history and experience and skills and knowledge. And part of this whole process of living a life of purpose, passion, and joy is making sure that that's not lost. In this environment in which they're in.
Yeah, it's really, for me, seeing seniors, they all have amazing stories. They all come from a place where, I mean, they've lived life. They've lived some amazing things in life. I know at my dad's community, they had a woman that was on Broadway for years.
Yep, right.
And she was in cognitive decline, but she would break out in song, and she still had an amazing voice. And you're going, wow. I mean, so it was really interesting. And you're like, oh, these people, they have stories. They're not just, seniors in an old folks home per se. And I just put quotations around that because they're not. And you learn to just really love their story and where they came from, and the heart that they are. I just, for me, I just want to just give them a big hug, because I just love who that they are even now, but yes, they all have their stories and where they've come from and the lives that they've lived. They're so interesting. Your mom didn't get to see it. I know that she would be so proud of you and what you've accomplished. And I think that that's so great. So how long before your community was built did she pass away? Did she pass away right before?
No, not really. It was about a year before.
Oh, well, year before.
About a year before. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't go any further in that conversation.
Okay.
So I would never, I certainly don't want to tear up on a podcast. So
yeah,
we'll leave it right there.
Well, bless your heart. Bless your heart. Well, I love the fact that, everything happens for a purpose, for a reason, and you're reinventing of senior living. And, I'm in Florida, but this is a national podcast. People are hearing this podcast all over the nation, and your communities are located in Florida. So you have one in Delray Beach, Palm Coast, and Winter Park, which is your main location.
No, not Winter Park, Venice.
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 Oh, okay. Your corporate office is in Winter Park. Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
And I knew this, but these are 3 beautiful locations in the state of Florida. But there are communities all over the country that offer some amazing different options for your seniors. So definitely, check them out, but do your research. I think the main point of our conversation today is find out what is super important, but do your research. One of the things, before you move someone in, before you move yourself in, your loved one in, it is time consuming. Everything you do, I think that I found, and probably Larry found as well, is when you reach this part as a caregiver, everything is a process. You have to do, it's time consuming, and you just have to really understand that every decision you make, whether it be on the healthcare side, the senior living side, it's just all a process, but it's a process that's really worth it, to do your homework. And you don't just pick something and just do it. You really do have to do a lot of research on it, but make sure you pick what's important to you, do your research on it, and then make your decision based on all of those things. But these 3 communities that are in Florida are absolutely beautiful communities, and they are on SeniorLivingGuide.com, and they're also available on the World Wide Web. Imagine that.
Oh, for sure. And thank you for that, Darlene. But I do want to reemphasize, because this was intended primarily to be instructional from the standpoint of really vetting communities. That time frame that I was talking about, 2010 to 2012, really was a result of just what had happened in terms of those years of healthcare centric architecture and operations. So for your viewers today, as we go into 2022, man, there was an explosion in the creativity associated with the development of new communities in senior living. And that's across the country. So it's not, yes, Tuscan Gardens is beautiful. And we certainly ascribe to having a resident enriched environment in terms of being able to allow our residents to have a full life. And continue to have a full life inside our community. But there are a lot of Tuscan Gardens out there just like that, who across the country have really seen the value of that sort of new view. Yes, you make sure that they're safe and secure, make sure that they stay healthy, and let's also make sure they have very enriched lives inside the senior living community. And I'd say that that's really the mantra of today's senior living environment, where I think ownership really understands that's what it has to look like. And frankly, that's what it should look like.
Yeah. One of the things that I, even coming out of this whole COVID, and not that that's really a part of it, but I believe that there is hope and then there is joy in senior living.
I want to thank you very much for inviting me on your show. And it's been a wonderful conversation from my standpoint. Thank you for that.
No, thank you so much for joining us on SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast. It's been a great episode.
Well, thank you. Well, good luck, and I wish you well.
Yes, absolutely. And if you enjoyed this podcast episode, we can be found on any podcast station, music station, including Google Podcasts, Alexa, and more.
Hey, Mom, how's the retirement home search coming?
Oh my gosh, I'm just so stressed out. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, why are you so stressed? What's the matter?
I don't know where to find anything. I just need everything in like one place and know what all the options are.
Does the idea of searching for senior housing seem overwhelming and you just aren't sure where to even begin? SeniorLivingGuide.com has great news for you. We offer a one-stop solution to take the stress out of your senior housing search. At SeniorLivingGuide.com, both our statewide Florida edition book and website are created to make your senior housing search very easy for you to navigate. We provide details on communities, including retirement, assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, and home health, allowing you to decide which best fits your needs and then connecting you directly with those communities. Visit us online at SeniorLivingGuide.com and start your search today and start de-stressing.